Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
I was a young neuroscience major, but either it was the time or I wasn't good enough. But they didn't take me anywhere. Even at the university where I studied, they didn't give me any hospital where I could be useful. I ended up being unemployed for 2 years. Well, as an unemployed person, I worked part-time, but even there they rarely hired me. My parents, thanks to them, understood that it wasn't me who didn't want to work, but the fact that I didn't have one. Also, sometimes I helped my friends. They came to me and asked, they say, "I have a headache. What should I take?" But one day, my parents gave me a brilliant idea to look for a job in another city. There was a problem with housing, but they told me that if the hospital did not allow me to live in an office or somewhere else for free, then my parents would send money to pay for it. At first, I was ashamed to take money from them, but I couldn't go against my parents because we always had a common language with each other. I don't remember a single scandal. In general, I found a hospital in no matter what city, number 65, housing, thank God, was provided. On Thursday, that is, the next day after I found this hospital, I went by train. The journey took about 11 hours. I mostly slept, and the rest of the time I looked at the picturesque views of the green forest and old villages. Ha! What a paradox. Recently I also went by train to visit relatives, and nothing has changed. The same forests, fields, villages. To be honest, I even like it. These views calm me down. It makes me feel so comfortable. But this is at first, and then I remember these events. I don't know why, but they constantly pop up in my head like I'm not impressionable. But this is what happens. Something carried me away. I arrived normally and immediately went to my place of work. Expectations were not particularly sky high. An ordinary hospital without privileges and so on. And so it happened. I was greeted by a white building. It looked, surprisingly, very good. I went inside. A man immediately came running to me. For some reason, I thought that he was a pathologist, although it turned out he was a nurse, which confused me very much. They took me to the 4th floor to introduce me to the head doctor. It turned out to be a young, pretty girl whom I eventually married. We even had a son. He is now 15. Our family is the same as that of my parents. Strong and also without conflicts. By the way, she later told me that she was not the head doctor. She just pretended that she was in charge. But in reality, this guy worked from home who gave her commands. I know it's strange, but what can you do? People. She began to explain everything to me very quickly. To be honest, then I didn't understand anything, but stupidly assented. But what should I do? There were no more options. So I just didn't care about everything. The main thing was work. I left my things in the office and began to examine the patients in the wards. The first patient was Mikhail Alexandrovich Grotskevich, brain pathology. He was predicted to die soon. I quickly examined him. It was clear that he was slowly going to his forefathers, but we could not do anything. I gave him some medicine and moved on. I checked 6 patients, whose condition was not as dire as that of Mikhail Alexandrovich. Since it was evening, I went to the office, filled out various pieces of paper, and went to bed. The clock said 22:56. In the morning, I checked all the patients again. Everyone was fine, but not Grotskevich. He somehow turned over on his stomach and pulled out all the tubes, even from the IV. I quickly turned him over and put an IV in him, but he wasn't breathing. I ran for other doctors who took him to the operating room. The whole hospital was on ears. It turned out that Mikhail Alexandrovich is a fairly well-known person here, since he has been lying here for 5 years no less, but always in the same condition, on the verge of death. Some patients said that when you are lying in this hospital, this man constantly appears in your dreams. No matter the nightmare or not, he will always be there. And almost always he scares the crap out of everyone, so that the whole hospital screams as if they were giving birth to 2 people at once. He himself is always calm, does not talk to anyone, only eats, and silently takes medicine. He apparently had no relatives, nor any friends, nor anyone else who could visit him. Once, in the ward next to his, a patient almost jumped out the window because of a dream in which this old man appeared. By the way, I haven't seen dreams for a long time, so I've never had such problems with his appearance in dreams. In general, I worked like this for a week. Nothing supernatural happened. But then, one night when I left my office, my door did not want to open, as if something was propping it up on the other side. I didn't have any special strength, so I called the guard from the window. I saw him smoking and asked him to open the door for me. When he came to the door, I heard his scream and footsteps leaving the door. To be honest, I was taken aback by his scream, or rather from surprise. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived. It turned out that right next to my office lay the corpse of a patient from Ward 8 or 9. A young guy smashed his head on the door of the ward and died near mine. I don't know how this happened because the wards are closed at night and only the security guard has the keys. And how did he get to my office if it was on the opposite side of a long floor and the guy himself had a broken skull? There were no motives either. In the hospital, they treated him normally. They even seemed to be friends from among the patients. His condition was good. He would have been out in a week or two, and that's all. But here it is. In general, according to the official version, he smashed his head on the door as it began to hurt unbearably. And after that, he decided to go and get help from me. But this version did not answer the questions of why the ward was not closed and why my office did not open. The guy was small. Even I would have opened the door that was propped up by his carcass. After a month of work, everything was forgotten, but in vain. One patient during the day tried to kill Mikhail Alexandrovich, to suffocate him with a pillow, as in various films. Fortunately, the doctors managed to stop him. He was supposed to be discharged that day, but then it seems he was imprisoned. One day I needed to go to another city, and I needed to help my brother with some matters, apparently very important. Then, as I was told, Grotzkevich, one night, ran throughout the hospital like Hermes in walking boots, shouting something, breaking into cells, and so on. They calmed him down, as it turned out. The grandfather noticed something on the street and wanted to help by knocking on the cells of other patients. And there was a robbery there. A young girl was robbed by 2 unknown people and ran away. But what made me quit happened in the winter. On my birthday, after a modest celebration in the office, I went to bed. But suddenly, I heard the sound of the lock closing on my door. I rushed to it and tried to open it. It didn't work. I tried to insert the key. It didn't work either, but I didn't have enough strength to knock it out. And then I heard a cry of fear from one of the patients and the sound of the door of the nearest room being knocked down. I then frantically called through the window for help, but no one responded. Then I heard the sounds of hitting either the wall or something else, mixed with crying and laughter. The laughter apparently belonged to Grotzkevich. When the first person fell silent, the second door opened, and the sound of breaking glass, as if someone had been thrown out of there. And so the doors opened. Sounds of struggle were heard, glass breaking, just plaintive screams and constant laughter, which was similar to the accelerated and distorted laughter of Santa Claus. Suddenly, I heard the sounds of the bug of several people. All the doctors and orderlies came running towards the sounds, although it was a little late. And suddenly, several female and male screams appeared, which died down almost at the same moment all at once. At that moment, everything died down, even the laughter. There was a knock on my door, calmly, unobtrusively. And a few seconds later, it was as if they were trying to break down my door with a battering ram. Although she was made of iron, she was shocked. With the next blow, he knocked down the door. I was not mistaken. It was Mikhail Alexandrovich Grotzkevich, only covered in blood and other human flesh. He screamed and jumped out the window. Only in the next second did I realize that I had jumped from the 4th fucking floor and was about to die. But I fell on a soft snowdrift. I looked up. This bastard was looking at me and laughing, and then he jumped down after me, only he landed not so softly but on the asphalt. I didn't check how he was doing. I just ran wherever I could, and ran as if I was the fastest person in the world. I ran to the police station where I told everything. They gave me some clothes and food, and they themselves sent there, according to them, a considerable crowd of brave defenders of order. In the morning, it turned out that scum had crashed on the asphalt. I even felt funny. I could knock down doors, I could kill a crowd with a click, but I died on the asphalt. I was also told about the fate of my future wife, whom we were dating then. It turned out that she left earlier than the others, so she didn't experience that nightmare. In general, I signed several papers and went to live with her. So what is next? What's next? Well, I got married, bought a car, a dacha, took my son to school, and so on. Here https://jutco.ru/bolnica-65, the most terrible stories from life. Pavel pulled me to go for a walk. The weather was good, the clear sky evoked a romantic mood. Dress warmly. It's evening after all. Don't be as harmful as you usually are, Pavel remarked. Okay, I looked at him lovingly. It's nice to feel the care of another person, although I have a difficult character, but Pavel loves me. While we are not married and we just feel good together. He did not drive the car, citing the fact that it was better not to spend money on gasoline now. He still had to wait a few days until payday. A business trip awaited me, which I really didn't want to go on, parting with Pavel for a long 10 days. I thought about buying a plane ticket, but I was tormented by fears, against the backdrop of frequent viewing of television news broadcasts about terrible plane crashes and hundreds of deaths, especially about the locomotive tragedy. This fear of flying settled in me, and I tried to suppress it. So my parents and Pavel convinced me to take the train. Pavel and I walked side by side, admiring the colorful sunset, when the bloody spot on the horizon blurred against the background of the setting sun. Immediately, landscapes of famous artists began to float in my head, and you thought, shouldn't I try to take a sheet of paper and paint, completely surrender to creativity? Maybe I can capture such beauty of nature. A woman with a dog, so fluffy and playful, fascinated me. I turned sharply to face Pavel, smiling mysteriously and looking into his eyes, and he immediately understood what I wanted. Well, you need to go out with him, and he will be bored at home alone, because we are always at work, Pavel began. I wanted a cat, but now I think that a Spitz is the best choice, and I don't mind the money for it. We need to have a child, not a dog. Give me a son or a daughter, and then we'll see about the dog. Pavel was already thinking about the proposal. We sometimes talked about our wedding, about the dress, about the decor of our one-room apartment. The most important thing is that it is your own and not removable. It's summer now, and I think that in a week, when Pavel should complete a very profitable job and receive payment, he will make me an offer. We've been dating for 1.5 years already, a year of which we live together. I am happy with him as I have never been with anyone else. Pavel was a tall guy my age, handsome, with dark brown hair, thick eyebrows hanging over brown eyes in which you could drown. Pavel never took advantage of his appearance and was a monogamist. He is not interested in cheap jewelry walking on the streets. I'd rather be a gold bar, heavy but valuable. We lived in perfect harmony, and finally I met a person who understands and accepts my character. He always knows how to calm me down, and I myself open my soul to him. I am ready to do anything for him, just as he is capable of anything for me. We walked slowly, breathing deeply. It seemed that my lungs had expanded many times. It was wonderful. The smells of lilac mixed with cigarette smoke, released by a group of guys passing by. Pasha squeezed my hand and pulled me closer to him by the waist. Nowadays, There are a lot of strange people, you never know. He explained his behavior to me. We loved adventures, and our particular passion was walking through abandoned buildings. Usually, we would go there as a couple or sometimes with a group of mutual friends. We have long wanted to take a walk through the former hospital, which became abandoned about 5 months ago. Nobody needed a 4-story hospital on the outskirts of the city, although it is possible that a larger building had already been built somewhere due to the building's disrepair. The hospital was equipped with elevators for lifting gurneys, wheelchairs, and transporting special tables with medicines and instruments. Quite good conditions were created inside for the comfort of patients and medical staff. The obvious fact of the popularity of abandoned buildings for all kinds of homeless people and other lower classes of society forced us to prepare. Pavel had a pistol and a knife with him. He possessed both close and ranged combat skills at a high level. His father, a retired military man, taught his son everything to live in this hectic world. There was still time to travel through the forbidden place. The boarded windows on the first floor did not interfere with us. Pavel tore off the board that had been knocked out with his foot and helped me crawl inside after he had gone down there himself and checked the situation. There was a damp and musty smell inside, the natural environment of such premises. All kinds of garbage, syringes, and broken bottles were scattered around, old torn things, dirty mattresses in the corners. Even small fires were found here. Now the building is boarded up and people don't gather here very often. Especially in some rooms it was never there, judging by the cleanliness. We walked along the corridor slowly, trying to avoid shards of glass and pieces of plywood. The unusual echo of the premises attracted with its mystery. No one stopped us from enjoying the amazing atmosphere of the hospital. Pieces of glass wool immediately evoked memories from childhood of how we were sitting with a friend at the beginning of 2000, and they warmed themselves in a pipe not far from the school. We didn't know what effect glass wool had on the skin. Then they walked down the street and combed their legs. At home, having examined them carefully, I saw grains of glass and understood why there was such an unbearable itching. Childhood was still something you didn't do with your friends, mostly chaos, but within limits, no doubt. Although, what can I say, sometimes teachers and relatives were ashamed and shocked by my behavior. Seeing the glass wool, I reflexively began to scratch my leg. Pavel knew my stories. He himself had many interesting, crazy moments, and in this we were very similar. "Are you choking?" he laughed. "Our brain deceives itself. Weird guy. Caution glass." I managed to jump over the rows lying at my feet. "You're not walking along the boulevard. You'll still get into shit and then you'll have to clean your sneakers on the walls. The main thing is not to run into something worse. What if there are corpses here?" Pasha rolled his eyes and looked at me with a malicious smile. "Well, damn." I pushed him slightly. "Let's move on. It's already starting to get dark. Another hour and then you will need a flashlight. By the way, did you take it?" "Yes, of course. Even 2. And also matches and a lighter. We have enough if we suddenly want to eat. We just need to find someone." Pasha. Okay. He hugged me and promised not to scare me anymore and to be serious. We looked around the entire first floor and decided to go up to the second. On the second floor, we found a dead cat. Apparently the other day he left the house, sensing death, and decided to meet it here. The remains of his entrails protruded from his torn abdomen, over which flies were already circling. Someone decided to feast on his flesh. I almost threw up. I grimaced and hurried away from this place. There was less garbage here. Suddenly we stopped abruptly. We heard someone's footsteps in the distance. Pavel tensed and took out a knife. He put a pistol in my hands and we slowly walked on our tiptoes. I also had my pepper spray ready in my pocket. Pavel walked quietly, turning around sharply and holding another pistol at the ready. Suddenly, in one of the rooms we felt someone's presence, judging by the characteristic smell. A homeless man looked at us, drinking something from a bottle, sitting on a mattress. Seeing the barrel of the gun pointed, he stood up and stuck to the wall, raising his hands. "Get out of here. Is there anyone else here?" Pavel asked, looking at him menacingly. "No. Help!" It was felt that the homeless man was very scared of us, judging by his wet pants. "There's a dead cat here," Pasha began to joke. "Have you already torn it apart? Or your brother's? Go prepare a snack for your Berta." The homeless man quickly left, apologizing. Having examined the entire second floor, we came across a package of bottles, covered with cobwebs and covered with dust with some kind of liquid. Pavel put on gloves and risked opening it. Regular saline solution. Another discovered corpse, but this time of a stray dog, half gnawed and decomposed, caused me to vomit. Something is not clean here. "It remains to find the man's corpse to complete the picture," said Pavel, seeing how I was already shaking with fear. But I, knowing his passion for risk, still decided to go through with him to the end. Passing by one of the rooms, we realized that there was an operating room here. There was a lamp hanging on the ceiling and an operating table on the floor. We did not find any tools except for cardboard packages and sheets of paper with some notes. He decided to take these sheets, putting them in a bag. Having finished the inspection, we went up to the third floor. It's already half dark. "Pasha, maybe we should turn back?" I felt anxious. "Let's finish this and then we'll go. There are only 2 floors left. Another hour and we will complete our mission. Don't be afraid, you're safe with me." The third floor greeted us with an unpleasant smell. It was difficult to climb there. The half-broken stairs forced us to hang. But Paul is adamant. We barely climbed onto the floor. The smell was terrible. We could not understand what could be producing it. It was a mixture of the smell of wet wool, some kind of medicine, and the bitter smell of decomposition. This smell was slightly felt already on the first and second floors, but on the third, it became unbearable. We turned on the flashlights. Pavel loaded the pistol. There were chambers here. Some of them still had couches, broken chairs, and a couple of nightstands without doors. The glass was dirty, but intact. I looked at the sky and noticed that the clouds began to thicken and the wind blew sharply, crashing into the windows, flying through the cracks. It made howls and groans. Passing by another abandoned room, we came across a small shelf with some papers. As we got closer, we realized that these were outpatient cards. But what are they doing here? Why weren't they taken away when they moved? Strange hospital. Let's see what's in these cards. Fascinating reading, a whole history of each person. Pavel blew off the dust and brushed the cobwebs off the cards. "Maybe we'll come back tomorrow?" I asked timidly, realizing that it was useless to argue. "Yes, everything is fine. No one will touch us here." "It's hard to get here," he said, and took the first card. Opening it, he began to leaf through it, sometimes stopping his eyes on the pages. After reading a little, he decided he lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and continued. "Also, take some literature for yourself. The hospital library is at your service. What you will never read is available to you now. Pash, I'm not interested in reading about these diseases. Moreover, doctors' handwriting is a mockery for the eyes. I'd better go for a walk nearby. Just don't go too far. Check the ammo. And if you do anything, shout at the top of your lungs." I didn't bother him. Walking down the corridor, I turned right and saw a faded sign that said, "Drug Testing Laboratory." This is the first time I have seen this in a hospital. In the corner, I was attracted by a slightly open door. I lit a flashlight, holding my gun at the ready, walked closer, and nudged her with my foot. It was dark inside. The batteries were starting to act up and the lights were dimming considerably. The inside smelled of that same wool and medicine. I froze, pointing the flashlight at some bedding. My gaze met a certain creature, black, with thick fur and human hands. Something that looked like a monkey raised its head at me. It was feasting on something that smelled bad. It looked like it was an animal that had lived here for a long time and was looking for food on the lower floors. Perhaps it was on it that all kinds of medicines were tested. Frightened by the light of the flashlight, it hissed, revealing huge fangs, and flew at me, piercing my hand, biting it. I feel my bone crunch under the pressure of her teeth. I couldn't scream from shock. My throat seemed to be squeezing. With great difficulty, I grabbed the pistol and shot at the creature, miraculously not hitting myself. The monkey flew away, making a terrible wheezing sound. I ran to Pavel, holding my hand. My clothes were already stained with blood. I left brown stains on the concrete floor behind me. I feel dizzy and weak. I'm falling in darkness. Pavel looked at the cards, carefully reading every word. His trembling hands and frightened eyes held a card with his father's name. He had no contact with his father and mother for several years, holding a grudge against them because they did not accept his girlfriend and kicked him out of the house, saying that they did not want to know such a son. Faced with a choice, Pavel chose the girl. His family had a lot of problems. His father raised him with harsh methods. The mother never supported her son morally. My parents have been quarreling a lot lately. The younger brother, Kirill, was weak-willed and dependent on his environment. He preferred to spend time on the street with friends, disappearing for days on end. Therefore, only Pavel saw most of the scandals. Having arranged his personal life, the eldest son found out that the younger son was addicted to drugs. Knowing his rancor, Pavel forgot about his parents and did not visit or call for a year. He just wanted to beat his younger brother, so he tried by any means to isolate himself from a possible meeting with him. With shaking hands, Pavel opened his father's card. He turned on the flashlight, since the light from the window was no longer enough for reading. Turning the pages, he sometimes read the notes. Having reached the end of the map, he saw an entry dated March 12, 2017. It was the last one. The patient was delivered on the night from March 11th to March 12th by the resuscitation team with multiple abdominal wounds incompatible with life, died after surgery without regaining consciousness. Pavel sat down on the couch. Frozen gaze settled on a stack of unseen cards. He began to look through the rest of the notes after a while. I open my eyes and see a white light, hurting my eyes with its brightness. Doctors stand in front of me with their heads bowed. Their completely black whites of their eyes peer into my face. They do not make any sounds. One of them brought dishes with tools. Some woman took a rusty scalpel with congealed dark red blood and brought it to my nose. I can't make a sound. Absolute silence. Any sound seemed to be absorbed by this room. I cannot move. My arms and legs do not give in to me, as if they are separated from my body and do not belong to it. The woman started trying to pull the whites out of my eye sockets. Another doctor opened my skull with a special saw. Then I find myself in some kind of ward, tied hand and foot. The nurse brought me a table with lunch. She smiled sweetly, and when she brought the plate to my nose, pieces of brain, eyes, and teeth were floating in the broth. The last entry was 12.03. The patient was taken to the intensive care unit with multiple bruises to the head and soft tissues. Arm broken in 2 places. She died without regaining consciousness. Suddenly waking up, I greedily swallowed air. It was already dark outside. Next to me lay a flashlight which gave its last strength to illuminate my path. Pavel was not around. It seemed like he wasn't even trying to find me. I tried to get up, but felt a hellish pain in my arm. I leaned on it and stood up with a wild groan, falling with my knees into a puddle of my own dried blood, thick as jelly. I felt chills and a terrible desire to drink. I couldn't scream. The ligaments seemed to have dried out or were completely absent. Leaning on the wall, I went to look for Pavel. He sat and read the materials of the last map, which belonged to his brother. A young man was found hanged in his parents' house. The expert's conclusion showed that Kirill was intoxicated with alcohol and drugs and the blood on his clothes and hands belonged to his father. I saw pale Pasha sitting motionless with a glassy look. I walked up to him and sat down next to him. He looked at me and suddenly woke up. "Pash, I feel bad. I'm dying." He looked at my face, blue lips, gray spots under my eyes. All my clothes were stained with blood. "Where have you been? What happened? Where did this happen?" He began to ask me in a trembling voice and rush around the room. "I was bitten by a wild animal. Some monkey just swooped in and bit my hand. I shot her, and I don't remember anything else. Do you remember where it was?" "There, straight and to the left in the very corner." Pavel took me in his arms and headed towards that door. Entering it, he put me on his jacket and saw that monkey lying on the floor. If this is a drug testing laboratory, then there should be some kind of antidotes here. Seeing yellowed, scattered sheets of paper on the table, Pavel began to examine them. Trying with all his might to calm down, he carefully looked for a possible name. And here it is, the long-awaited phrase with the name of the medicine. All that remains is to find this name. There were ampoules covered in dust in the cabinets. Half of them were broken. After a minute of searching, an ampoule with the desired name was found. The note said that it needed to be administered intravenously, but there were no syringes in the office. Remembering that he had seen a syringe in the doctor's table, where he was looking at the charts, Pavel ran as fast as he could after it. Returning back, he realized that he was late. He injected the medicine into the cold body of his girlfriend and buried himself in her neck. Tears flowed down my cheeks. Shuddering in sobs, Pavel felt my weak breathing and realized that without a split second he could have lost me forever. The phones were completely discharged. We couldn't call an ambulance. We waited for several hours, weak and hungry. With great difficulty we got out. On the street we were lucky to meet a young couple in a car who were not afraid to take us to the hospital. A month after this incident, Pavel proposed to me, and 4 months later we got married. We're doing well now. My business trip did not take place, but Pavel received several lucrative offers from customers. We support each other as much as we can. After this incident, we changed our hobbies to safer ones.